A quick note before today's episode. While I'm a professor of nursing at the University of Minnesota, this podcast, Midlife Unmasked, is a personal project and separate from my professional responsibilities at the university. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider before making any decisions related to your health and wellness. In keeping with my role as a nurse researcher and educator, I'm here to bring evidence-based information to improve overall health and well-being. It is my goal to be a trusted source of information and to build this community where we can all learn, grow, and share together. With that said, let's jump into today's conversation. Hey, Midlifers, welcome to the Midlife Unmasked podcast. I'm your host, Robin Austin, a nurse researcher and educator, and your guide to navigating everything from healthy aging and wellness to big stuff like caring for aging parents, mastering work-life balance, and discovering your next great adventure. So are you ready? Let's do this. Hey, Midlifers, welcome to our episode today called Restoring Harmony, Reclaiming Women's Midlife Health. We're joined by the founders of Harmoni Wellness, Ivory Emery and Andrea Zimmerman. They're both experienced women's health nurse practitioners with over 20 years of combined experience in OBGYN care. They've learned firsthand how women feel unheard, discouraged, or unaware of health symptoms that may be both natural but also treatable. Harmoni Wellness was born from a shared passion to change the conversation around women's health and to create a safe, evidence-based, and empowering space where women can rediscover comfort, confidence, and connecting to their bodies. Together, we'll explore why so many women suffer in silence and what it means to feel quote-unquote off during different life stages, and how mind-body harmony is the key to lifelong well-being. So let's jump right in. Hey, Midlifers, welcome to our podcast today. We are super excited for a special show, Restoring Harmony and Reclaiming Women's Midlife Health. We are extremely excited for our two guests today, and we're going to dive right in. We don't want to waste time. We have so much to cover today. So thank you both for being here. If you want to both introduce yourselves and then share a little bit about your background and kind of what inspired you to create Harmoni Wellness. And then also, was there a personal experience that you may have had either through your career or personally that really led you down this pathway to empower women's health? Whoever would like to go first.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Zimmerman. I'm a board certified women's health nurse practitioner. I'm a certified menopause practitioner. I've been in nursing since 2001. I've only ever treated women. I've had a passion for women's care since I started my career in nursing. And I'll let Ivy introduce herself, and then we can talk about how and why we started Harmoni.
Yes, and I'm Ivy Emery, and I am a board certified women's health nurse practitioner. I also have a certificate in public health nursing and a certified lactation educator. And we started Harmoni. We have a big focus on perimenopause and menopause and meeting the needs that women express during this time of life. But we also understand that that is PMS, PMDD, PCOS, really just understanding the needs of the person in front of you instead of needing to hone down and label anything in particular. But where we can help, we like to jump in. And how we started is Andrea lives in California and I live in Minnesota, and we met in our master's program. And I saw Andrea working with women on incontinence care. And it was technology I'd never seen before. And I'll always remember what she said to me. I reached out to her because we were still friends after grad school. And I said, "What is this magic that you're doing?" And she said, "Ivy, I'm so proud of this work." And I'm getting goosies thinking about it. And I knew there was no reason for her not to tell me the truth. And she said, "We're getting really good results with this. It just takes minutes and it can change people's lives, how they feel about themselves, the activities that they do." And I had a personal story of struggling with that after pregnancy, and it just felt too young to laugh and leak, sneezing and peasing. It just subsequently was getting worse. And I felt like, what is there to do? And I'm too young for this. And so having a personal perspective on that, but then also seeing how it impacts life. So I asked Andrea to help me understand how to bring the technology here. And the more that she and I were chatting, and then she said, "I want to do this with you." And it was the biggest relief of my life that she was going to partner with me. So that's how it started.
That's awesome. I love the sneezing and what you said. Yes, that's
Sneezing
very
and
true.
peasing.
Sneezing peasy, yeah. Andrea, go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I was just going to say, if you have been in the clinic taking care of women, you know that bladder incontinence is incredibly common. but it's a difficult topic to talk about as a clinician because there aren't that many tools in the tool belt to resolve bladder incontinence. There's medication, there's pelvic floor therapy, and then there's surgery. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot in between. And a lot of clinicians are kind of uncomfortable talking about it because they don't have an easy answer for how to solve the problem. And so it's a problem that's incredibly common. It gets missed frequently in OBGYN after pregnancy and postpartum care is finished. Women just go on living their everyday lives. And then I meet those women and do an exam, in their 60s, and they've been dealing with incontinence for decades. It never resolves on its own. So this is part of the passion behind starting Harmoni Wellness. We really wanted to break the silence on so many of the very common health conditions. They're complex. They're very common. And I feel like women confuse what's common with what is normal. It's not the same thing. Just because you and your friends are all peeing when you laugh or sneeze doesn't mean it's normal. And there is something that we should do about it, and we should go after it and try to resolve it as fast as we can. And it's never going to happen if clinicians are afraid to talk about it. And it's not going to happen if women are afraid to bring it up and demand better care. So that's why we opened Harmoni. We really want to normalize conversations like this so that we can get better outcomes for our female patients.
Yeah, I love that. And that kind of goes right into our next question too, is about breaking that silence. I think for a long time it was, oh, that's normal, or it's okay, I'll deal with it. And you're the last person to get taking care of your own health, right? As we all get busy. But you've said that many women don't feel heard, but also when sharing their symptoms specifically, it's uncomfortable to talk about, like it's taboo. I don't want to share. This is embarrassing. And so why do you really think that today in 2025, that pelvic health is still considered taboo? And how does this really, the silence that we have that continues to go on, and how does this really then affect detection, prevention, and also personalized treatments?
I love that question. There is a culture of silence that we have, and it is perpetuated, I think, by our clinicians not exploring those questions. When we're doing an evaluation, if we don't ask specifically and we say, how are you doing in general? And people say, I'm doing fine, especially in the Midwest. Everything's fine. And I learned this with a lot of the lactation work that I've done is you need to ask specifically, great, I'm glad it's going well. So, how are your nipples and and they'll say, oh, cracked and bleeding, it's terrible. And it's like, okay, now we're getting into something that we can talk about. But if we don't ask, we're not going to hear it. But also that culture of silence of not asking sort of reinforces that it's normal because we're asking for problems. And if we're not asking, then we're not indicating that there might be an issue with that. And I don't think that clinicians, absolutely, they want to help, but we don't have the tools to really explore what kind of options are there to be successful. So, we say do Kegels and then women will do Kegels. They may not like we always hear, I could be better. Women are like, oh, well, I'm probably not doing them right. My body just isn't, my body's probably broken. Everyone else is probably doing perfect, but I'm not doing them right. I don't do them enough. I could be better. So there's this sort of, we hear that quite a lot, but no one has actually gone to a pelvic floor therapist. Well, I shouldn't say no one, but most people haven't gone to a pelvic floor therapist and really learn how to do proper Kegels. And what we're finding too is that sometimes there might be too tight of a pelvic floor. So making the relationships, bringing up the conversation, normalizing the conversation, and then finding resources that we can refer to, even if it's not me that can take care of the individual, but I need to refer to a specialist that could be helpful. That's going to be really helpful. All these specialists working together to address the challenges. But I also think that there is that I ask quite often women, do you have any incontinence? And they say, nope. And I go, okay, really? Okay. Yeah. No laughing, leaking, sneezing and peasing. We kind of make it funny and cute because we're trying to be relatable. And they say, oh, that? Yeah, totally. I have that, but that's normal. Those are quotes, but that's normal. So it is more of like a pelvic I almost said pelvic health crisis. It's a public health crisis, but involving public health education about women understanding their bodies and when they can ask for help and for whom they can ask help from.
Yeah. And that makes me think too that it should almost be mandatory training, the pelvic health floor training, even if you are in any sort of annual exam, like or any annual appointment. It should just be normalized training. So yeah, didn't mean to cut you off, Andrea, if you're gonna go and say something as well.
No, not at all. No, you guys are on the right track. I think all of everything that Ivy's saying, I hear the same things in clinic. Women just, we really haven't done a great job with educating our women as they're growing up, as young women, becoming midlife women, and then teaching them what to expect in our later years. We do a really good job of talking about pregnancy, how to avoid pregnancy or how to carry a pregnancy. And the rest of the conversation is just so shallow. And I think some of that is generational. I think some of it is cultural, where I grew up in the Midwest. I understand the conservative culture. We don't talk about things as freely as we do on the West Coast where I live. And I see that shift. It's very apparent when you're speaking with clients what they are open to talking about, what the conversations they expect to have. And then when you surprise them by digging deeper and talking about things that no one's ever asked them before, it's a little uncomfortable for them. However, I know that if I don't ask those questions, we're never going to uncover the root of the problem, and we cannot resolve a concern that a woman has if I am not brave enough to bring it up. And so this is part of culture, and this is part of what needs to be holistic care for women. We need to talk about all of the health systems. We need to talk about function of all of the parts of your body, even if it's a little intimate and it's a little embarrassing, maybe because no one's asked about it before. If I don't talk about your sexual health and I don't talk about your bladder function or your incontinence, it's never going to get resolved if it's a concern.
Yeah, you bring up such great points. I think kind of diving into our next question is somewhat along these lines around either women's own misconceptions, providers' own misconceptions. And so what are some of the biggest maybe misconceptions that you hear from women other than, well, that's just normal kind of idea, specifically around menopause, vaginal dryness, pelvic floor issues. But also I think the other component, the flip side of misconception is also misinformation. And we now know that most people get their information from social media, health influencers. And so that can be sometimes good because it can open up a conversation. At the other times, it can be a little bit hurtful. And I'm worried about misinformation that's out there potentially. And so what are your thoughts around sometimes more normalizing more of these conversations and then also at the same time addressing potentially misinformation? So kind of a two-part question.
I think that most women are very surprised to understand that menopause is not your grandmother's health condition. Perimenopause starts in your late 30s. And if you are face to face with a young, vibrant woman in her 30s who has potentially, preschoolers at her ankles, she is not thinking of herself as anywhere close to menopausal. It is the furthest thing from her mind. You can literally be perimenopausal and postpartum at the same time. And no one is talking to women about how their bodies are changing as young as their late 30s and early 40s. And so they're not thinking about how to seek help for perimenopause symptoms because they don't think of themselves as being in the demographic of the changes in my body are related to hormone deficiency. And it's going to continue to go down this pathway until I'm fully menopausal. So first of all, just getting the education out there for women that perimenopause changes occur as early as your late 30s. That is news to most of my clients. When I tell them, I'm not at all surprised that your testosterone is low when you're 39, they're shocked. They are not thinking of hormone deficiency at all. So I think the first step is just getting education out to women so that they are prepared to have this conversation while they're still in their 30s with a clinician, and know that as their body starts to show some of these symptoms, that they can approach their clinician and say, I want to have a conversation about this. At what point should I be looking for treatment instead of just struggling?
Yeah,
So
great
that's
point.
a big one.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
understanding that they are in that part of life.
I think inversely too, it's I'm already through it. I'm through it.
Oh,
And it just really shuts down the conversation. Perimenopause folks, at least, when we've been at public events and people, walking by and engaging and what have you, and perimenopausal folks are like, huh, and they're kind of thinking about it, but we get a lot of, I'm already past it. And I'm thinking, okay, there are a lot of, I think most people are thinking about hormone therapy as one or two things. And it turns out we have vaginal estrogen, we have systemic estrogen, we have, testosterone, we have progesterone. So there's different hormones, there's different ways that we provide them, and there's different things that they do. And they're not appropriate maybe for everyone, but one of them might be, and it might be really helpful for someone. And I especially am concerned about folks who are menopausal, and I want to know if they have vaginal dryness and if they have leaking, because vaginal estrogen can be really, really helpful, and it's very, very low risk. And I will ask people sometimes at fairs and public events, but vaginal dryness, laughing and leaking as they're walking by. And sometimes you kind of just let it go and you think, darn, I'm concerned, because that is yet another public health crisis. And they just had that meeting, the FDA hormone expert panel meeting, talking about vaginal estrogen. And they talked about not just the cost to Medicaid and the government, but which is, I think they said billions, but also the collateral damage, the suffering. And we know that incontinence leads to other things. We know it's a fall risk, and we have fractures. We know that dementia and Alzheimer's and incontinence, some of those things all go together. So that would be another big one, is I'm already through it.
yeah. I love, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, please go ahead.
I was going to say, to piggyback on what Ivy was saying, I can't tell you how many women have come to our clinic and they said, I talked to my OBGYN and I'm having dryness, or I've lost my libido, or I'm starting to put on weight. And the clinician's response is, well, you're getting older.
Yes.
Yes, you are getting older. Yes, of course you are. We're all still alive. We're all getting older every minute. But that does not mean that all of these changes that come along with aging are things that we cannot correct, or they don't deserve a bigger conversation. And it contributes to this idea of, well, I'm not in control of how I'm going to age. These things are going to happen to me. It's going to be uncomfortable. And that's the way it is. And Ivy and I can't get the message out fast enough that that's not true. There are many, many things that we can do to keep ourselves functional and comfortable and feeling vital for hopefully all of our days, which, we want women to feel that power and independence for their whole life.
Yeah, that's a great message. And I love the idea of starting the conversation earlier, because I really, truly think that perimenopause, midlife is such a critical window for women's overall longevity and health. And we're talking more about health span versus just lifespan, right? And so how do we get that message up? But even though in those that say, oh, I'm already through it, I'm fine, I'm done, we can still have improved quality of life. We can still talk about health span and really trying to then maybe combat some of the things you may be dealing with now if you are past menopause. So I think it's so important. And I would agree, can't get the word out fast enough. So I think that kind of brings me to then my next question. We're leading into them so well. So thank you so much. And so I think a lot of women's health is what we've realized, and even for myself as well, it's reactive, it's not preventative. And so by getting the word out a little bit earlier and really having kind of those conversations about really needing to be proactive around pelvic health, normal, regular overall health, sexual health, all of those components. And so what screenings around midlife or the lifestyle measures would you see that make like the biggest difference?
Well, I think that definitely the conversations. I mean, we have women who see their OBGYNs, they see their doctors annually. So having our clinicians, no matter what their specialty is, we need to understand that women have a whole body, and they will express X, Y, and Z in an annual exam. And the clinicians are doing the best they can, where they're hearing something and then they're like, okay, well, let's try this for that, and let's try this for that. And the same thing is true of women. Women are extraordinary coping group. They are doing everything they can to keep it all together. They're in a sandwich generation. So they're showing up to us after they're finally hearing like, oh, all of these things. Wait, how many symptoms are there? Data shows people go to 8 to 9 specialists for all these things. But if we can in our primary care, in our annual exams, if we can think about when they're expressing all of these things, that those could be a part of these hormonal changes, that's a really important screening, because a lot of people will say, I love my OB. I love them. I just don't know that I'm being heard. And so continuing that relationship is important to women. They want to feel validated and connected to whom they're sharing this. And those kinds of barriers, not hearing it, not acting on it, it doesn't just put someone off a week. It's not a barrier that they just circle back to maybe 6 months later. Sometimes it's years later. And then they usually come to us with a really long list of supplements. So you were talking about misinformation on social media. There's a lot of supplements. And then there are all these polypharmacy, adding in all of these different medications to try to mitigate all these symptoms. So that would be a screening. But I also know that there's been a lot of talk about what are other signs, what are some things that we have the ability to do, but we're missing. And women are starting to use their voices around this. And that would be like DEXA bone density scans. And, again, it's not our primary care doctors that are doing something bad for us because they're not doing these scans, they're withholding the scans. We need to understand that we have set up our standards when we educate what is a good preventative measure, preventative screenings in these normal annual exams. And it is indicated that we do these DEXA scans at 65 years old. And I didn't care about that when I was in my 20s. I'm like, I'm never going to be old. It's like, this is never going to happen to me. Bone density scan, that's the least sexiest thing you can say to me. But I wish in my 40s that I knew I could get it done earlier, because it really does. Like, I usually will say, what's less sexy than bone density scans? Having a preventative fracture and having osteoporosis. So talking more and more about density scans. And I know that there's the bone density scans. And I know that there is some of that are menopause. I call them menopause champions. There are a lot of the folks that present at the Menopause Society, and they're putting out new research. They're writing books and leading conferences. So they are talking about these earlier, but bone density scans. And what was really impactful to me was when we had clients who were told that they weren't going to have that ordered for them. They asked for it and they said no. And then subsequently they ended up getting one somehow. And then they said, I'm really frustrated because I have osteopenia and I am active. I watch what I eat. I was nervous to take estrogen, even though I had so many hot flashes. Like, it was so obvious that estrogen would help me, but I was nervous. But this would have been information that would have impacted me to choose to start estrogen earlier if I knew, because there is nothing I can do to improve my lifestyle to da 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 da. So it made me start thinking about more information, not unnecessary, not anything that isn't evidence-based, but still thinking about why withhold information from women that is helping them make decisions about their health. Another one is the lipid scans. I think that these lipid panels aren't being interpreted probably as robustly as they can be. I think we're looking for, in traditional primary care, just kind of looking for, when do we need to intervene with a medication, but not really seeing that that's a sign. Those changing LDL, changing triglycerides. Women will come to Andrea and I all the time, and we've all heard it. Any human being, I'm sure, has heard someone in their 40s and 50s say, I've never had high cholesterol before. Why do I have high cholesterol? I'm not doing anything different. Or I'm working out harder and I'm eating smarter than I ever have. Why do I have high cholesterol? Well, those are some earlier indications. I'm really happy to see that there's more and more studies being done about that and the links, and how can we detect these things earlier to have data that's not so subjective, but also another puzzle piece to put together with how someone is feeling and symptoms they're experiencing, but to also be able to look at it from a whole body health picture.
Yeah, that's great. The DEXA scan still annoys me to beyond belief. I'm like, that is something policy-wise we can address, because I agree. 60, are you kidding? Like, no, that's just no. And the lipids we hear that a lot as well. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Andrea, please.
I'm just going to jump in with something that might not be as obvious, but we are meeting clients who are finding that their anxiety and depression symptoms are either new or they're exacerbated when they're in perimenopause. And many of them are also self medicating with alcohol, which culturally, having a glass of wine, it's, acceptable. It's a fun thing. It's a social thing. Women use it to relax. But we do know that there are women who are using too much alcohol. There's some very significant health consequences for women with too much exposure to alcohol. And I think that having a generalized anxiety screen and also a substance abuse screen when women come in for primary care visits or OBGYN visits is appropriate, because we need to be counseling our women about the dangers of using alcohol, and we need to be supporting them if they're having anxiety and depression, trying to get to the root of the problem. Maybe they were never properly diagnosed with ADD when they were younger, and the mechanisms that they were using to control their anxiety are no longer functioning once they hit perimenopause, and they are needing help, and we need to meet them where they are and provide that support.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that part up as well. And actually that's been said to me by a few colleagues or women that I've met, that undiagnosed ADHD or now diagnosed midlife is really a significant impact on their overall health and well-being. And so I think it's, like you said, also with anxiety, maybe exacerbated anxiety, depression, and then self-medicating with alcohol and other forms of medications as well is definitely something to be addressed. We could do a whole episode just on that component as well. But I think bringing up more awareness to it, that if you can just, women want to pause and say, what has my behavior been like? And how maybe have things been fluctuating and changing as I'm going through this? And maybe I need to have some additional assistance or just ask the questions of a trusted provider, I think will be just a way to start the conversation and being open to those conversations with women as well. So that's great points I think that you bring up. I think going into what you've been talking about too, and you've also, both of you have mentioned that gaps in data, what is missing, what is maybe outdated, what is omitted potentially. And so data's been kind of my entry point into really understanding more about midlife women's health. And because there's literally a gap and there's nothing, there's some of the studies. And I just came from the Menopause Society conference last week, and they were saying, we don't have any data on this. We don't know yet. I mean, we're just starting to understand these linkages like we just talked about. So how do these data or the gaps really impact quality of care, research, future innovation for midlife women's health? It's exciting on one hand that we have so much potential, but really also sad on the other hand as well, that it's causing a lot of gaps, I think, in care. But really our next steps forward to really ensure that women have better experiences, that are represented, and their voices are heard.
I usually start a consultation with a brand new client by saying, okay, the history here is with the Women's Health Initiative. 25 years ago, every provider in the country was scared to death to continue to provide HRT for menopause care, and women were afraid to take it. And then there was just silence and no access for decades. And so you cannot blame your provider who went to medical school and was told, this is really dangerous for your clients. Please try to get them comfortable in other ways, but HRT is really dangerous for her. Those providers were really taught this is not good medical care. But now we're in a very different moment. And now we have more sophisticated medicines than what they had available then. And we do have some good information from the WHI, but the headlines that were made no longer direct our care. So we are doing things differently with different medications. And there is research to support that care. There is new research. It's a really good time to be a woman. It's a really good time to be a midlife woman. There are researchers that in this moment, and you may have met them when you went to the menopause conference, there are orthopedic surgeons, there are urogynecologists, there are OBGYNs, there are neurologists. There are specialists who are diving into every function in our bodies and identifying how women's bodies work, not just a smaller version of men. How do women's bodies work? And we now have some very specialized information that you can apply today. And I love to get I get really passionate about it. I love to get my clients interested and curious. Here are some researchers. Here are the clinicians on social media. They're they're doing the clinical research, hear what they have to say. It's really fascinating. This might inform how you age over the next 30 years. So I know that there is a gap in care, and I have met women over and over again who missed the window of safety for HRT because of this gap, but we can't go back in time. I cannot get really focused on that when there are so many women right this moment who not only can I get comfortable, but I can prevent some of that long-term disease and dysfunction as they age if I can get them interested in preventative health now when they're young enough for it to make a difference. So bringing up the evidence and bringing up the data, our clinic is shellacked in articles, in books. We talk about the champions. We have them on our resource page on our website because I want women to find this information in the comfort of their own home, on their own time, connect with the researchers that they like to listen to, and then maybe they'll start getting all those nuggets of information that will improve their health down the line.
Yeah, I love that.
And I just would like to add too that something that's a little more specific is the gap around testosterone for women. This is a constant challenge. Why don't we have a patch? They were in clinical trials there and then they went away. And other countries have the patch, but that would be something that I would like to see fast tracked is female dosing for women, and then also subsequently research around what are the levels that are the best for women, and when do we intervene and how do we deliver it? All of those kinds of things. We know how impactful that it can be to mental health. That's another thing. The FDA has approved it only for hypoactive sexual desire disorder. When we talk to our clients and we talk about, well, what does libido mean to a woman from a male perspective society? It's sex, orgasm, libido, sex, orgasm. That's it. There's so much more. Our biggest sex organ is our brain. And when we think about how testosterone impacts women, it's so clear that a lot of that, probably, all that we know about it, the majority of all we know is it impacts the mental health, the brain, the energy, this sort of like connection to self so much. And when, that's one of Andrea was talking about, anxiety and mood being one of the first symptoms. We know that testosterone starts to decline really early for women. And the first thing they may say is, I don't feel like myself, loss of libido, those kinds of things. So that would be, if you know anyone at the FDA, if you know anybody, please. And Dr. Casperson brought it up too. This isn't my original idea. Dr. Casperson brought it up at the FDA for a panel.
She did.
So, but I strongly want the community to know that there is an ask, and we now in this moment in time, we are using our voices collectively to ask for better care, ask for more resources, ask for more education.
Yeah. And I think the collective voice is getting stronger and stronger. And I think that's where the groundswell is going to continue. And hopefully, like you said, fast track some of these things, because it's been things people have been talking about for years. But really, truly, it's the voices that we have to continue to advocate and get our policymakers interested and on board. So that brings me to really understanding also about your model of Harmoni Wellness, and what you emphasize collaboration and treating the mind, body, the whole person. And so what does that look like in practice? So if someone's curious about what that means, especially for women with midlife, navigating stress, we mentioned sandwich generation, hormonal shifts, and also physical changes. So I'd love to hear more about your philosophy at Harmoni Wellness.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, our philosophy, it was very easy for Andrea and I to get definitely on the same page. The minute we met, we said, we were little baby WHNP students and grad school. And we were like, when I graduate, this is how I'm going to care for my clients. And I can't wait, and all of these things. And we just hit it off, and there's something to being seen and validated. And there's something to being like, same, right? So it made us really close, really fast. It's formed a passion and a bond for how we deliver care. It's not always easy to rethink how you're going to deliver care. It's, I remember when I'm thinking about how are we going to map out our follow-ups, and what is that going to look like, and how is it impacting the client, and how is the relationship, how important is continuing the relationship and being proactive instead of reactive. And So mapping all those things out. And I remember that there were times where I'm like, but wait, we've always done it this way. And I'm like, yeah, but we're trying to do something different. So like even with myself, and we've had consults with people, really well-meaning business folks saying like, look, you're giving up too much time. Time is money. Time is a resource, and you're giving up too much time. It makes more sense if you streamline and you do like this and this and this. And then I'm like, that's our brand. Our brand is taking the time to talk to women, because that's what has been missing. So our model, I'm a triage nurse at heart. I was a triage nurse with the midwives at Park Nicollet for a long, long time. And it's listening and hearing, and then doing a lot of education to try to empower people to understand what is going on with their body. And then they know when something is working. They know when something, maybe there's more room for something else. They know when it's appropriate to add in other things to try to optimize health. So our model is very much educating the client. That is, we spend a big bulk of our intake. And in fact, we do a free discovery call too. We want to make sure that no one is obligated or feels obligated to do the next step before they get a chance to ask us questions and get a vibe on, maybe I am your person, but maybe I'm not. And if I'm not, then I have resources for people you can talk to. There's no hard feelings. Like, I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. So the discovery call, then there's the intake it's usually an hour to an hour and a half long. We have a lot to cover. We do complimentary follow-ups, because what I learned is, and especially as a triage nurse, but I did a big lactation project with the midwife group at Park Nicollet, and we need to be proactive. We need to have an outreach point to see how someone is doing, instead of waiting for them to contact us when there's a problem, because sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes it doesn't, they don't consider it a problem, or they're like, nah, I'll get to it. And then it's weeks and weeks and weeks. And then they stop using a medication, or they didn't have access to something. They heard something that was scary. So before they leave, we like to book an appointment for them to just have a complimentary touch point. And then we can decide, what are those next steps after that? Do we have another complimentary touch point in between what are considered appointments? The clients seem to really like that. I think that, we do get feedback saying, I feel heard, I feel cared for. This is very different than what I'm used to, which is a huge, huge compliment. So in that case, being able to continue these conversations and these touch points, we are able to bring in more of a whole body. I mean, the education piece really does start with every single system in your body, and trying to, make sure people understand what hormones do to different, like what we're expecting different hormones to do, how they play together, but then also how do we mitigate symptoms, and how do we consider long-term function and aging with dignity. So that's how we get started. And it brings in that whole person health. And then we just have more and more opportunities to reinforce that and follow up and tell them about strength training and all of those kinds of things.
That's amazing. Andrew, do you have anything to follow up on at all?
What I think is different about our care is that we ask our client, what are your priorities? Give me the whole list of what's going on with you. And I plan to establish a relationship with you so that we can work through your whole list. I am not the most important person in the room when I'm having an intake and a visit with a client. She is the most important person in the room, and her concerns are then my concerns. And so I want to not only make as long of a list as she has, I want to know what her concerns are. And then I want to give her every single option I can think of that's on the table that could ameliorate her concerns. And then it's up to her to tell me what she's comfortable with. I really dislike the model of care where the clinician walks in and does a quick listen and says, here's this, go home, I'll talk to you in 3 months. Patients don't know what that therapy is. They don't know what they're supposed to expect. They don't know how long it's going to take to make a difference. They don't know what the parameter is to decide if it's successful or not. I don't like any of that. I want women to know what's going on with their body, what to expect. I want to know what my measure of success is with a client. I don't want to just, if she's still breathing in 3 months, that's really not a parameter of success. I want to know if the problem that we were trying to take care of Is it better? How much better? Is it completely gone? Or did we only get 50% of the way there? Here are the options that remain. You get to choose what you're comfortable with, and I will support you in that. And for me, having worked in so many different settings in women's health, that's just very, very different than what's currently the norm. But I think it's better. I think women need to understand what their options are and have a choice and expect that their concerns are going to be resolved. That's good care.
I would add to that too is the validation. We hear you. You're not going crazy. We hear what you're saying. We know that this is actually normal. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with your body. We're demanding our bodies live decades longer than they were intended to, and that's okay. We can do that, but we have tools where we can do that more comfortably or in actually increasing function and dignity. So but just validating when women internalize so much. We talked a little bit about high cholesterol, and without educating them about why it's happening, we have a lot of feelings about cholesterol. There are a lot of feelings about, wait a minute, I have high cholesterol. I've worked so hard. I haven't done. Now there's something wrong with me. And it's kind of interesting because it seems like on paper, it's a data point, but there's a lot of feelings about how people take care of themselves and their health. And when it's not going as expected, they take it hard. And there's a lot of times where Andrea and I are like, look, I know you don't have a lab at your house to say that all the work you're investing in your health and your strength training and you're watching what you're eating, and it's not reflected so much on the inside or how you feel, but I'm sure you'd be in such worse shape if you weren't investing so much in your body, in your health. So it's a lot of cheerleading too, because these women the demands on their time and their energy is wild, and they're probably functioning better than they feel.
That's a great point. So I think that the final question that I have for both of you is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to women in entering their 40s and 50s to live a vibrant and empowered health or life?
Yeah, well,
My advice.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I would back that up to the 30s. I know that I know that Andrea said it earlier, and I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, we need to start educating women in their 30s, and I think we need to standardize that kind of care. Even, we know that we have very common, very routine touch points with women at their annual exams, but also during pregnancy. Why that's a great place to start talking about pelvic health. And even if it's not you that's going to provide it, it's the resources. And, here's some things to learn about, but also this is what perimenopause is.
Yeah, great point. Andrea.
And I was just going to say to help women get curious, there's lots and lots of resources out there for women to start getting information when they're young so they can anticipate their body's changes. I want women to start talking about this time of life at home so that their children are hearing about this and it's normalized. I want this generation of women in their 40s today to be the very last generation that hits this midlife change without having any preparation or education or a plan. And I think that will make all the difference. Being able to look ahead, understanding your family history, knowing what you're heading into as your body is changing is going to make so much of a difference about how we age, how we grow old. It's going to make just a massive shift in health outcomes and comfort. So
I love that. Thank you both so much. I love that we're the last generation to be in this position. So thank you both so much for your time today. A wealth of information. It's Harmoni Wellness. We'll have the links in our bio and on our website. So thank you both so much for today. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of Midlife Unmasked. I hope you found inspiration and a few key takeaways. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to share it with someone else that could also benefit. And don't forget, this podcast is here for you. If you have a topic or a question you'd like us to explore, please send it our way. Your feedback helps us reach even more listeners on this shared journey. You can find us on social media and our website, midlife-unmasked.com. That's midlife-unmasked.com, and the links are also in our show notes. Until next time, Keep unmasking your potential, embracing the possibilities, and living your best midlife with courage and confidence. Take care and see you next week.